Welcome to the Fade 5 College Edition here on YouTube and the podcast. Ben Wittenstein, Nate Jacobson next to me. Nate, week 7. We've been looking forward to this week for literally weeks because of how exciting the slate is. How you doing?
Yeah, I remember in like August telling people at like a barbecue I was at, like, make sure you're not doing anything October 12th because this weekend is absolutely loaded. It actually probably could have been a little bit better. Maybe if Oklahoma was doing better and that game against Texas, the Red River would be good. That's a game we're not going to talk about just we don't have really any bets. So a game with a pretty big spread. And like Tennessee, Florida could have been maybe better, but it's still a big weekend. There's so many important games, especially with the 12-team playoff. Like a game like LSU Ole Miss becomes magnified even more, especially with both teams having one loss. And then, of course, the big one in Eugene between Ohio State and Oregon. I can't wait to watch it and learn about those teams.
I'm so ready, man. I've had this week circled, and honestly, next week too. So we've got like 2 straight really good college football weeks, and we're coming off a pretty decent week for the podcast. I think we had a pretty good weekend here and there. You hit some good money lines as well, which I'm very proud of.
I mean, we had our group ride on Vandy plus 23. Didn't even need the points.
We should have done money line, man. Honestly, we should have just been men, done money line, and gone all the way. But yeah, that was almost a rocking chair winner, honestly, with just the spread at plus 23.5, because there was not really any doubt that Vandy was going to cover that game. Some doubt they might win it, but they kept it close for the entire game, so that was great. But we'll start with the plus bus, Nate, a place that you actually hit on with SMU last week. So we'll start with you and something you like this week, something is plus money that you like.
Yeah, not as juicy, but a game I did mention earlier just in the top of the show. I like LSU over Ole Miss, and I think maybe you can wait later in the week and get a better number. I do think there's a lot of desire from the public to get involved with Ole Miss and LSU, maybe not the most trendy team. I know Brian Kelly, not everyone's favorite coach, but I still think he's a pretty good football coach. So I think the big reason I like this game, or I like the LSU side of this game, is I just think Ole Miss is a tad overrated. There's always a lot of hype about them. They bring in these transfers. They have a lot of talent. Everyone loves Lane Kiffin on social media. There's a lot of buzz this season about them because of their schedule and a lot of hype, even Jackson Dart to win the Heisman Trophy, which I guess he's not out of the race, but that performance against Kentucky definitely won't make him one of the favorites anytime soon. And I just think Ole Miss is kind of a product of an easy schedule. They had a really easy non-conference schedule where their toughest game was Wake Forest, who might be the worst team in the ACC. And we saw 2 weeks ago they were exposed against Kentucky, and now they're playing another big game. They just played at South Carolina last week. Now they're going to LSU. Meanwhile, LSU, fresh off a bye, Tiger Stadium at night. I think the spot sets up nicely for LSU. I think we could have a really big game from quarterback Garrett Nussmeier, who isn't as good as Jaden Daniels, but Jaden Daniels is also one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL so far this season. I think Nussmeier, as I said, not as good as Daniels, but still a really good quarterback. And I'm hoping that LSU shows some improvement on the defensive side of the ball. They made Blake Baker the highest paid assistant coach in the sport over the offseason, and Baker was the coordinator for Mizzou, and Mizzou's defense, as we've seen, has kind of dropped off. So I feel like giving Baker this bye week before the Ole Miss game could be very helpful for him. So I like a good overall performance from LSU in kind of a tough spot for Ole Miss, and an Ole Miss team that I just frankly don't quite believe in. So I'm going to bet LSU spread. I actually did bet spread at not the best number. Going to probably re-up on them at plus 3.5 and also put a little money line on the Tigers.
Yeah, I was a little surprised that this got to 3.5 with LSU being at home, and we know how hard it is for teams to come in to Death Valley and play there, especially if it's kind of a later night game. So I'm with you. I think LSU probably is the right side here. Home game, off a bye. They're getting an Ole Miss team that I think has been underperforming and probably just isn't as good as people expected them to be this season. So I think you're taking advantage of seemingly a good number.
Yep, and Ole Miss, I thought that loss against Kentucky wasn't really a fluke. Maybe they should have won that game, but like they never were going to cover that game, and there's some real concerns from Ole Miss's offense that night or that day, others than their opening drive when they scored a touchdown.
All right, I'll go on the bus. Nate, take control of the wheel because we're going to go back out west. We're going to go to a Western Big Ten team, the UCLA Bruins, a team that started the season out about as low expectations I think you could have, especially starting their their trek into the Big Ten. People knew that this was kind of a transition year. New head coach, not a very good offense, not a great defense. And they kind of showed that in the first couple weeks of the season. I mean, Indiana went there and just blew them out on the road in the Rose Bowl. Like, it was just not a good look for UCLA. But, Nate, don't look now, because the team's been kind of slowly creeping and being a little bit better. They've covered their last 3 games, and it's been an absolute gauntlet for them. Look at this last 4 games that UCLA has played. Indiana, which is now a ranked team, top 20 team. They went to LSU. They played Oregon, and then they went to Penn State. I mean, this is an absolutely insane schedule that UCLA has had to play, and it's honestly pretty impressive to me that they've been able to cover 3 straight games in a row with a gauntlet of a schedule. So for me, they're back home. They now play Minnesota, a team coming off an upset win with some questionable calls here and there against USC at home in Minnesota. So Minnesota has to now go out west. They have to play a UCLA team that's slowly but surely getting a little better as the season goes on, especially defensively. They've looked at least a little more solid than they did to start the season. I think this is a pretty good hangover spot for UCLA or against Minnesota as well off that big win. Fans stormed the field. You know, it was a whole shebang. We're fading the storm, fading a big team that had kind of an unexpected night last week. So I like UCLA plus 5.5. I think is a really good bet on the spread. But I also think this could be an upset watch for UCLA this weekend. They have a good run defense, which is something that Minnesota does really well. They rely on their run game, and UCLA actually has a top 50 opponent EPA per rush defense. So maybe they stop them on the ground. Minnesota can't really do much through the air, and UCLA sneaks a win at home as a big dog.
Yeah, I was kind of lukewarm on this bet, but you made a lot of good points. So I'm probably going to add this to the card before Saturday. I like it's a good spot a bad spot for Minnesota with the travel. And then, UCLA, I think there's a lot of teams in college football that you just want to kind of throw out because they potentially have quit. But UCLA is one of those bad teams where you mentioned they are doing a little bit better and they're covering spreads. So I know they've had a brutal schedule, and this kind of not the end of it, but kind of the game after the brutal schedule. But I could definitely see the Bruins staying within the number.
It could be a little bit of fresh air for them, too, with all the intense opponents they've been playing now, kind of play a Minnesota team that's slightly above average, but not on the level of Penn State or LSU or Oregon. All right, Nate, Fade 5. So we'll start with number 5 in our list of plays this week.
Number 5.
I'm going to go with Pitt. Lay in the 3 points against Cal. This is a good spot for Pitt, I think. Cal has to travel cross country to play this team, and they are coming off a very brutal loss against Miami. This was a game that they were leading by 25 points against Miami last week, and they gave up the lead. They lost by 39-38, and now they have to deal with that loss, pack up all their things, go on a plane for 5+ hours, and go play Pitt on the road. Pitt only laying 3 is a little surprising to me, honestly, because Pitt's offense has been really good. They're top 10 in yards per game, and you look at the way Cal has been playing defense, and it hasn't been very good. Miami's number 1 in the country in yards per game, and they gave up 570 yards against Miami. So against the Pitt offense that's also top 10, I expect this team to just keep the scoring going. I don't really know how Cal stops this Pitt team, especially on the road. The defense is 78th in opponent success rate. Pitt's had success moving the ball this season. Eli Holstein has been a really good quarterback for them. To me, I just think this is a great spot, fading Cal off a game they probably should have won, and now having to go cross country and play a Pitt team that has really gone past expectations this year, being undefeated, being a top 25 team, and only laying 3 in this game. I really like the number.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. This was actually one I had before you came in and took it from me before I sent it to you. So it's okay. We'll be able to talk about more games in that case. But how does Cal get up for that game after blowing a 25-point lead in the game where they hosted game day? Obviously, you probably prefer if Cal won that game to be betting against them in this game. But just the circumstance of how demoralizing that loss probably was for Cal. It's hard to see them get off the mat against Pitt, who has surprised this season because Pitt used to be a team that was defense first under Pat Narduzzi, and now it's kind of a team that's opened up the offense a little bit with Holstein. So I like that a lot at -3. If it is 3.5, I would wait to see if it gets back to -3 on game day, because every time it's gone up to 3.5, money has come back on Cal. So if you agree with us with the spot, maybe don't bet the 3.5 and wait till you can get a -3, -1 time.
All right, Nate, number 4.
Number 4.
Cool. Let's stay with the theme of hangovers, and you got to fade Vanderbilt this week, right? I mean, the win over Alabama, the biggest win in program history. You take the goalpost down Broadway Street. I guess you throw them in the Cumberland River. I think that was the name of the river downtown Nashville. And
Yeah.
how do you get up after that? And then you're also go to Vandy, so you're paying attention to academics. You had to go to school this week. It wasn't all it wasn't all football, and it's like, let's get focused for football. So I just see Vanderbilt in a really bad spot here, going to Kentucky off the bye. I know Kentucky is not a team you love laying points with because they usually play at such a slow pace. Their defense is much better than their offense, but I do like Kentucky off a bye just to get the run game going and Vandy not to be able to score a lot. I know Pavia has done some amazing things, but it was the cover last week was very, easy, but the win, according to some win expectancy models, was pretty fluky, even though the eye test showed that Vandy did go toe-to-toe with Alabama. But I'm just expecting such a hangover, a letdown. This is kind of the poster child for a letdown where you want to bet against Vandy. You might not love laying points with a team like Kentucky, but I think there's enough there where Kentucky could kind of win a low-scoring game, like 27-10 or something, and we get home. So maybe even look under in this game, or a Vandy team total under, but let's just keep it simple and just lay it with Kentucky, that is, at 13.5 or better. Once it gets to 14, it's a little bit of a different story, maybe a little bit of a smaller bet at 14, but make sure it's either minus 14 or better on the Wildcats this Saturday evening in Lexington.
The under was honestly a spot that I might hit. I was a little surprised with how high it is. I think it's like 46.5, something around there. I don't know if you're able to confirm that, but that's I think that's a little high.
It's on the move now. It's down to 44.5. So
oh boy, that's
just
getting a little low.
Just a normal Wednesday in college football betting where random games are on the move and you have no reason. You have no idea why.
No, I honestly don't hate that bet. I think, again, like you mentioned, it's tough to lay the points with Kentucky a lot of the times, especially double digits. But Vandy, they're not going to play a better game than they played against Alabama last week. They're not going to play that again this week. And Nate, that's a great transition to my number 3 pick.
Number 3.
Because we're going to be fading the West Virginia Mountaineers at home. And we're fading them off an amazing game that they had last week against Oklahoma State. I sat at a bar, Nate, drinking some Heinekens, bet on Oklahoma State, and I just never had a chance in hell to have that. Yeah, there was a deal. It was like $4 Heinekens.
Fair. Beer of the month or beer of the day?
Just always $4. It's a great bar. We got to go sometime. It's fantastic.
Sounds
it was a couple deep. It was great. I think the Heinekens were the reason I bet Oklahoma State, so maybe I lay off of them this weekend. But honestly, I thought Oklahoma State was going to have a chance at home, and they didn't. And you look at that game, and you look at the way the Cowboys were going into that game. It was a terrible spot for them. West Virginia was coming off a bye. Oklahoma State had played a couple really good teams. They were tired. They're exhausted. I don't think they're that good to begin with anyway this season. So I made the wrong bet against West Virginia. I'm going to bet against West Virginia this week. I don't think it's the wrong side as Iowa State comes into town. It's like the Coal Rush night. People are going to be decked out in black. The players, the fans, drone shots at halftime. There's like a drone show. It's going to be nuts, but I think you just have to push that away. You have to ignore it because I think the numbers really favor Iowa State here. You can get them at minus 2.5. You're laying a little bit extra at minus 118. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, I'm okay with laying the 3 as well for Iowa State. That's what I bet them at minus 110 at a normal number. But we're fading West Virginia off essentially a perfect game that they had against Oklahoma State last week. 558 total yards of offense, 10.5 yards per attempt, and no turnovers, and they were 6 for 7 in the red zone. I don't see a more perfect game from West Virginia. And we know they're a decent team. They're a decent to good team, honestly, but I don't see them 2 weeks in a row having really good games. I just don't see them being that consistent, especially against an Iowa State team who comes in. They're kind of a sneaky under the radar team, but their stats are incredible. Their net EPA rank is 11th in the country. So they typically outplay their opponent every single game. They're top 10 in EPA defense. Their pass defense has been really good. And Rocco Becht hasn't been the best quarterback on earth, but he's been a really serviceable to good quarterback for this offense. So I think Iowa State at this point, getting them under a field goal, getting them at a field goal, going against a West Virginia team that's coming off like their best game that they've had all year and maybe even in a couple years. I really like fading that and going with the Cyclones.
Yeah, I'll say is I'm on the same bet as you at Iowa State minus the points.
Let's go.
For a lot of the reasons you said, so don't need to talk about it too much more.
Love it. Don't forget, You can sign up for a free account at thegamingjuice.com. You can read Nate and myself. You can also read Brad Evans. He's on there writing up some NFL picks and his props and his fantasy advice. It's great. It's fun. It's all free. You can sign up for an account. You won't have to pay a single dime to read or have an account. And as we say that, Nate, let's go to your number 2.
Number 2.
Yeah, let's stay in the Big 12, another game at night. Probably the latest, not the latest game, but one of the latest games, at least in the late window. And it's Kansas State -4 against Colorado. And I know I've kind of been a Colorado hater maybe on this show. We went head-to-head Colorado-Baylor, although I feel like I got a little bit unlucky in that game, and I think you'd agree with that, with Colorado winning on the Hail Mary. But I do think that I was impressed with Colorado against UCF when they last played. Both Colorado was on a bye last week. But that Baylor game, if they lose that game, I just think that we're viewing Colorado a little bit differently and a little bit lower. And I think Kansas State is kind of at a discount, honestly, at this game at -4. I don't think it's going to go down any lower. There's been money early in the week in Colorado, and I think kind of the resistance has been -4, and I wouldn't be surprised if Kansas State took some money. But Kansas State, I think they're still kind of being deducted or kind of downgraded a lot because they played BYU in what was a tough spot. And I just think that kind of was an outlier game where there was a 7-minute stretch where everything went wrong for Kansas State. And then they got back on track the next week. They play Oklahoma State, which I guess not the best team at the moment, but I think they figured out run the ball with Avery Johnson, run the ball with your running backs, Giddens and Edwards. Edwards actually a Colorado transfer, so I'm sure he's going to be super motivated for this game. And then DJ Giddens, their starters, having an incredible year. And then Avery Johnson, you can run him, quarterback, make sure he doesn't make any mistakes. And I just think that's a good recipe for success for Kansas State against a Colorado rush defense that's not very good. So I'll have more about this game on the Gaming Juice later this week, but I'm just going to leave it with this. Give me Chris Kleiman with a week to prepare over Deion Sanders. I'm having a feeling that the coaching staff of Kansas State used the bye week more effectively than Deion Sanders and his coaching staff and his son, who was out in Vegas over the weekend at the WNBA conference final. So I think I'll take the more bunned up team, laying the points in Boulder against a Colorado team, like I said, not a believer in.
100%. I really like this bet too. I think I'm actually going to go bet this, make sure I can still get Kansas State just laying the 4 points. I think that's a really good number. People factor in going on the road. It's a night game at Colorado, but we talked about this. We bet the Colorado team win total under at 6. So I think we really are not high on this Buffs team for the most part in general. So I think this is a good spot for them to lose at home against a better prepared team, better coach team. I 100% agree with you. I don't trust Deion Sanders having those guys ready over the bye week. Group buy time, Nate. Show everyone what we got.
Number 1.
You want to start us off?
Yeah, we're going to the biggest game of the weekend, or at least one of them. I think it's the biggest game whenever it's 2 versus 3, 2 undefeated teams. It's at least the biggest game so far in the Big Ten, and probably will end up being the biggest Big Ten game. But I know we both like the home underdog here in Oregon at +3.5. I'm not sure where this line is going to go. I will mention, and something that last week I was kind of looking into Ohio State against Iowa, and the line was crashing, and I couldn't really figure out why. And then on Saturday, more money came against Ohio State, got that to 17. So in terms of where this number is going, maybe there's someone out there in the betting market with influence, a bettor who doesn't like Ohio State, and this is going to get closer to 3 or even 2.5. Just based on last week. I don't know if that was more like there was a pro Iowa bettor, but it was kind of telling that Ohio State got bet down only -17 at home against an Iowa team that just doesn't really have much of an offense. So I know Ohio State won and covered that game, but just something to keep in mind. But I think the kind of the handicap here, maybe this is a little bit of a tough game to try to figure out because Ohio State's wins this season have been against Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall, a rebuilding Michigan State, and an Iowa team I mentioned that doesn't really have a great offense. But just I'm not sure how good Ohio State is. And it's what if they aren't as good as their number 1 or number 2 ranking and power rating a top 3 team? I think there's definitely a case they could be. I mean, Jeremiah Smith, amazing wide receiver, only a true freshman. Emeka Ibuka, another great wide receiver that they have. two of the best running backs in the country, and Judkins, the transfer from Ole Miss, and Travion Henderson. So yeah, those are a lot of things that say Ohio State could be the best team in the country, but I kind of want to see it. And you're playing at Oregon, a night game, an Oregon team that has gotten a little bit better each week. I know the first 2 weeks were ugly, but I think their offensive line and just in general play has been really good the last 3 games. I will say it wasn't against the best competition in Oregon State, UCLA, and Michigan State, but I still think that Oregon is going to have a really strong showing here, kind of their best game of the season at home at Autzen Stadium against Ohio State team who could be good, but if you're getting a field goal or more, I'll take Oregon in that spot.
100%. And we know, Nate, how poorly so far a lot of teams have played when they have to travel cross country and they have to go to the West Coast. And Ohio State's going to have to do that. And they have not had a great track record against the spread when they have to play on the road in a tough environment. I really like Oregon at this number. We both took them at plus 4.5. I like them at plus 3.5. I really think this number should be closer to like 2, 1.5. I don't know if pick'em is a very fair thing to say, but you mentioned it. Like, Ohio State is good, but I need them to prove it to me. I have not been impressed with the way Ohio State has played, to be honest. And we could talk about Oregon's strength of schedule and how they haven't played a ton of great talent, but Ohio State really has not played a ton of great talent. You can make the case that Iowa game last week at home was probably the best team they played all season long. And Iowa's really not even that great of a team in comparison to begin with. So to me, I don't think Ohio State is as great as this number suggests, being almost over a field goal favorite on the road in a tough environment when we know teams going out west are just not really playing that well. Give me the Ducks, man. With a number like this, I'll scoop that up all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those games where we could look like idiots if Ohio State truly is that good, but it's just one of those things. Like, I have enough questions about Will Howard, who wasn't maybe the most like Kansas State, like basically told him he could leave so they could play Avery Johnson. So I just want to see like them play in a big game. And honestly, I'm just excited for this game just to learn what these teams are more than anything, and how the Big Ten race is going to shake out, and how these teams fit into the college football playoff.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. This is going to be probably one of the most fun games of the entire weekend. Don't forget, also, you can rate and review us. You can follow us on Twitter if you wanted to. You can follow Nate. You can follow myself. You can follow Brad. You can subscribe to the podcast as well on YouTube. We're everywhere. We're going to be posting our articles and our picks every single week. I'm going to have NBA plays also as well during the NBA season. So that's going to be fun. But Nate, as we get down to the end of the show, it's bonus time. It's bonus time. Everyone get ready. We got bonus time picks. Nate, get those jazz hands going. Do you want to go first? I can go first. Whatever you're feeling. You had the jazz hands, and this is a play that you really like. So I'll let you go first for this one.
Yeah, definitely want to go off the board for bonus time. And it's kind of an ugly one. And actually just moved to a key number, but you could keep it as is and put on the screen and leave it at plus 6.5. We'll try to find a plus 7 on Southern Miss. You can keep it. If people are watching by this long, they should just listen to what we're saying. Southern Miss plus 7. Frankly, it's not a bet on Southern Miss. It's a fade on their opponent, Louisiana Monroe, who are coming off a big upset win last week as over a 2-touchdown underdog of James Madison. And James Madison was kind of looking like the potential dark horse playoff team, as in a team from the group of 5 who could be the best, highest ranked group of 5 team if some things broke right in terms of what's going on in the Mountain West. So big win for ULM, a team that was one of the worst teams projected going into the season. So it's kind of fading ULM off the big upset win against James Madison. Now they're laying points against Southern Miss. So take Southern Miss at plus 7. But 6.5, I think, is fine. But obviously you want the key number. So yeah, off the board here, but Southern Miss on a Saturday afternoon, the good old fashioned 4:00 start.
Ooh.
Which
That's
who knows
a
what channel
classic
that's
football
on.
game. I don't know what channel that will
4
be.
4:00 Central. So that's just, it's not in the normal rotation. It's not going to be on the on a main network. Probably ESPN Plus, honestly.
Skip your Saturday afternoon nap for this one, boys and girls. It's the big game of the week, the big spot of the week. I'll go for my bonus time, Nate. Everything I just talked about bad about Iowa, I don't necessarily take it back, but, I'll back off a little bit because I like the Hawkeyes this weekend. And kind of like how your bet is not necessarily on Southern Miss, Mine's not necessarily on Iowa this weekend either because they're playing Washington. And this is like the classic letdown spot for the Washington Huskies. They have a big win last week against Michigan and the Wolverines. A lot of people expected that win. You bet the Washington money line. So I think they did a really good job of limiting what Michigan does well. Well, now they won that game. They have to pack the bags, go on the road, go to Iowa. And Iowa's only 2.5 point as a favorite. I really like Iowa in this spot at home. A lot of the big Washington strengths is something that Iowa can counteract. Washington's strength is passing, and we saw them pass the ball a lot against Michigan. They pass way more percentage-wise in their offense than they run the ball. Iowa has been pretty good at defending the pass. 23rd in opponent EPA per drop back. It's a negative EPA that their opponents have, and they're also 31st in opponent passing success rate in the country. So almost top 30 in pass defense for success rate, top 25 in EPA per drop back for their opponent. A lot of the times their pass defense does a very good job at stopping the passing game of their opponent. Iowa's defense is also 14th in early down opponent success rate. So a lot of the times their opponents do not do well on first and second down. So if that's going to be the case for Washington and they're going to be in long down situations and third down and pass the ball a lot, that's going to go right into the hands of Iowa's defense in terms of being a good pass defense team. So with all of that being said, Nate, especially with Washington, a little bit of a hangover, late letdown spot for them going on the road to Iowa, I like the Hawkeyes laying the 2.5. Get it under a field goal. It's probably going to be a low scoring, awful, gross, classic Iowa type of game. But I'll lay the 2.5, the little short spread here for the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, I agree that it's either Iowa or pass. I'm just not sure if I could personally get there. I just think Washington maybe a little better than we think. And I think that game against Michigan kind of showed that if they stop making mental mistakes, that they could kind of, reach their potential. However, this game is at 9 a.m. local, traveling 2 time zones. They just went to Rutgers.
True.
Like situationally, it's not good for Washington. Just had the storm the field win in the national title rematch. So it makes sense. I'm just going to just stand on the sideline and root for you to win.
Fair enough. I appreciate it. Also, their money line is like minus 135, 137, if you don't mind laying a little extra.
Honestly, so 2 weeks ago, Washington took a lot of money against Rutgers the day of the game. It was a Friday night. And maybe the same thing happens here, where if you do like Iowa, wait until game day that morning, 11 a.m. local Central Time in Iowa, and maybe you can get Iowa at a nicer money line price. Just something to keep in mind if you're trying to time the market perfectly, which is impossible to do, especially this season.
There we go. I'm driving to Wisconsin on Friday afternoon, so I'll have to stop right at the border. I'll have to stop right at the border, check the phone, see if the line's moved, and then make the bet and go to the Mars Cheese Castle once I cross the border.
Or you can just text me.
That's true. You could be the bookie in Illinois. I appreciate that. Well, everyone, we appreciate you listening, watching. Don't forget, sign up for the free account at thegamingjuice.com. You can read all our lovely bets and picks and write-ups for all the sports. We got hockey now. We got basketball. It's going to be a hell of a fall and winter on thegamingjuice.com. And it's all free. So sign up for an account. Read Nate and myself. It's always fun. You can follow us on Twitter as well at those handles. But Nate, if you got nothing else, good luck this weekend, man.
Good luck to you too. Sorry, I was on mute.
Classic Zoom.